Okay.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Werner told me he likes tortilla chips. So
That's right, I did say.
So we're going to eat some tortilla chips. So, you know, if you guys will bear with us, and we'll share maybe. Here, that's fair. So how is everyone?
Yeah.
So my lovely wife is right here, and she usually does this, so I'm sort of... How many men... You know, the wonderful thing about at least my wife is that she keeps me humble, but it's a very difficult task sometimes. So how many people came to see me? Oh, well... Thank you for lying. How many people came to see Werner? Wow. How many people have been to our events before? All right. You know, we really have a wonderful, vibrant community. And it really is quite extraordinary to be with you and to do these events. And my name is Jim Doty, and I'm the founder of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education here at Stanford, which is part of the School of Medicine. And some of you may have read the book that I published a little bit ago. And if you have, thank you. If you haven't, go buy it, please. It's now in 31 languages. And it's coming out in Mongolian soon. So for any of my Mongolian friends, you can just be a little patient.
Jim, name the name.
Oh, Into the Magic Shop, a neurosurgeon's quest to discover the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. Actually, I'm going to tell you a story real quick because it also reminds me about being humble. So my wife and I had lunch the other day, and there was an outdoor cafe, and there were only 2 seats left with another couple. So we sat down with them, and after a while, the woman looks over, and she goes, "I know who you are. I know who you are. You're famous. You're the guy who wrote that book." So I smile, and yes, I am. So I accepted that, and we became friends, and it was wonderful. How many of you who have been to our events have seen me cry at our events? How many have cried themselves? And you know, what happens is that, as I was saying earlier, really the funnest thing that I do for me, and in fact it's very selfish, is to do these types of events where I engage and interact and hopefully allow you to share that experience of being with some of the most profound thought leaders in the world. People who have impacted hundreds of thousands of lives, if not millions of lives. And seeing the world through the lens of these individuals and the work that they have done to change so many lives in a positive way not only allows us to sit with them and share their experience, I think, but also allows us to look into the windows of our own lives and see what might be possible. When I told a few people I was inviting Werner to be at this event today, they said, "What does he have to do with compassion?" And I was actually shocked. Because as many of you know, he was at and really started this movement of self-transformation and in some ways the power, if you will, of positive thinking, but in a very confrontational way that allowed you or forced you to perhaps look at your bullshit, using a term that I think he may have said once or twice. And you know, there are many ways to deal with your bullshit. And some find a path through the Dalai Lama. Some find it through other spiritual leaders. I have to say, though, Werner has been a hero of mine because what he does is he practices ruthless compassion. You see? Because a lot of people think that compassion is sort of mamby-pamby and it isn't powerful. But in fact, compassion is really one of the most powerful things. And when you are forced to look at, in a very direct way, how you have created the prison that limits you from reaching your own potential and forces you to look at that, what it does is it's an incredible gift because it gives you the key to open the door. And that's what's really extraordinary. And if you've followed EST, if you've seen the power of Landmark Forum, even today, where hundreds of thousands of lives are changed, you will understand this. Innumerable studies have been done that have demonstrated very scientifically the extraordinary positive effect that EST and these types of trainings have really had on people and changed really millions of lives. The other interesting thing, there are studies that have demonstrated that people who have taken EST are more empathic and are more motivated to be of service to others. Because once you can recognize your own suffering and be relieved of that suffering, then you see that so many others are suffering and that in fact you were empowered to alleviate their suffering. We were having dinner last night and Werner said, and I absolutely believe it's true, that his mission in life is to relieve suffering. And fundamentally, of course, that's what compassion is. So without further ado, we will start talking about ruthless compassion. So thank you so much. Did you see that? That is the power.
I'm going to sit here because of the
yes,
good
yes,
year. Thank
good. I get the guacamole.
Listen, thank you very, very much for coming. You know, I know you have other things to do with your life, and it was really, really, really great for me to see people who have been a big part of my life for a very, very, very long time, people I feel really close to and have had an extraordinary experience with. But the first thing I need to do is, if you don't really know who James Doty is, you are privileged to be in the presence of a truly extraordinary human being. Jim, let's sit down.
Yes, sir.
If you, take the time to look up James Doty on the internet so that you know who you had the chance to be with. Really, really, really makes my hair stand on end when I think about what the guy has accomplished and who more, maybe even more powerfully, who he actually is. So, and I have to tell you how Jim and I met a friend of ours, a common friend of ours, invited us to dinner at their home, and I didn't know who Jim was, but you know, every once in a while you have the experience of having a connection with somebody. I'm not talking about his experience, I'm talking about my experience. I had this experience of connecting with the guy. And I said, gee, I'd like to come talk to you. Would you mind if I did? And he was very gracious. He said, no, come on, whenever you want. And I never went. And I was sitting, like a fool. I never went. At any rate, I was sitting in my studio with the other people, colleagues with whom I work, and I talked about the experience that I had had at Francie's house, Francie and Charlie's house, with this guy. And about an hour later, Hanukkah, my wife, walks in and says, Werner, I just heard from James Doty. And that's how this all happened. So it makes me very, very happy, really happy. And I have a lot of respect both for James as a extraordinary surgeon, neurosurgeon, and for James as an extraordinary human being, for his extraordinary generosity and contributions to life, and finally for this really remarkable, let's see what compassion really is about. And I hope he'll take some time to tell us about some of the research, because it's quite extraordinary. As a matter of fact, Jim's going to leave right after, because he has to get to the airport to take an airplane to San Diego, where he's going to give a talk to a whole group of doctors tomorrow about the impact, he'll say more, but about the impact on healing, the impact it has on healing. And so now I have to do two things from me. Most of my brain works okay, more or less, but the part that remembers names does not work at all. And it's sometimes embarrassing for people when I can't remember the name of, somebody I've known for 20 years, or certainly I can't remember the name of the author of this great book that I read and so forth. And I want you to know it does not embarrass me, so you don't need to be embarrassed for me when I can't remember a name. The other thing is that I went, I have an ear that doesn't work well. That's why Jim was kind enough to sit on my left. This is the good ear. And I went to, so I go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and he pokes around in there every 6 months or so to see if he can keep it working a little bit. And at any rate, I told him, look, my nose runs all the time. And he says, okay, and he looked and so forth. And he said, use this for a week, and everything will be fine. So I used it for a week, and nothing happened. My nose still ran. So then he said, this stuff, you get it at the drugstore, and you put water in the bottle, and you put the stuff in the bottle, and then you put the stuff up in your sinuses, and that should take care of everything. That didn't work either. So then I finally went back and said, no, it didn't work. And he said, have you ever heard of old man's nose drip? So now he doesn't bother with my nose anymore. But you'll see me every once in a while take care of my old man's nose drip.
On that note, how many people in here have old man nose drip? I guess it's also old woman and middle-aged and woman drip too. So, you had a transformational experience yourself, crossing the Golden Gate Bridge.
By accident, yes.
Maybe that's how.
or coincidence.
Can you just tell us what happened?
Yeah. So, by the way, I studied every discipline I could follow, participated in it, and I can't think of disciplines that you wouldn't even know the name of. They're so weird and far out. But at any rate, I got value out of every discipline I ever participated in, but none of them got me, sorry for the, whatever this is, got me over the bridge to a really fundamentally transformational experience. And that's what happened, and it completely altered my life. And what the experience was one of first realizing that I wasted my life running after things that had no value. And hiding it with all of the knowledge I could gain and all of the things I could making money and things I won't mention here in polite company, and all of the things that somehow looked like they were what it was about, but in that moment on the bridge, I realized it was all hollow, that there was no humanity in it, and that I had really wasted my life. And then, in addition to that, I also realized that I actually didn't know anything. I was truly ignorant, because although I had learned a lot during my life, because I loved learning, everything I knew in order to look good, in order to be smarter than somebody else, in order to make money, but it was all in order to. I didn't know anything for itself. And at the same time, these experiences are difficult to comprehend, because at the same time, I realized I could know anything. That, so to speak, the truth, the what matters, the what makes a difference was actually available. And then finally, and this is one that takes a lot more explanation than we're going to get into tonight, but I realized that on the next galaxy, looking back at what was in this galaxy, on this Earth, nothing was inherently significant. That all of the significance that I had placed on the junk that I had placed the significance on was not inherently significant. And then I looked for what was inherently significant, and I couldn't find anything. Nothing inherently significant. And that left me free to be and free to act. I had taken the walls of the prison that I lived in and just disappeared them. I mean, I couldn't reach all the way that way, or all the way this way, or this way, or that way. I had done pretty good down there, by the way, by then. But I could tell that there was no longer any limitation, and that it was up to me to, and by the way, what a me was, I'll get to in a second, but it was up to me to own what I made significant. It belonged to me. I was accountable for it. I was responsible for it. It was up to me to own whatever it was that I would make significant. And I started to live a life of my own making.
Now, though, if we go back to your early background, growing up, you married early.
17. Or maybe I was 18. I guess I was 18.
Much more mature by then.
Yes. No, but it was a really good thing, Jim, because being a young husband and father, I just had to perform. My family didn't eat if I didn't perform. When I look back, I've forgotten, somebody asked me about it. I look back, and I never, ever, ever worked for a salary. I always worked on performance. And so it helped to keep me straight. To borrow one of your terms, sorry, Jim. Very hard to bullshit yourself when your family depends on your performance. Sorry.
No, but you ended up having 4 children with
yeah.
your first wife, but then you
Fortunately, I was married to a saint. Yeah, really.
But then you left.
Yes. I deserted my wife and children.
That's a form of leaving.
Yeah. Well, but it's important for me to own the reality of it and to take it on squarely. And since you brought it up, I'll just tell you when I reconnected with my family, I had to do it without being sorry for what I did, because that would have alleviated some of the burden of what I did for me. At least I was sorry. No, I couldn't get away with anything as far as I was concerned, except you deserted your wife and children. And you're going to have to deal with that and do whatever you need to do to balance the books if you can.
What was, though, the seminal event, though, that made you do that? Was it, you were saying, nothing had meaning, or but back then it all had meaning. It was all very, 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 very meaningful and very important and very significant. No, I had gotten myself into a place where I no longer could function effectively. And that was the genesis of leaving, of deserting. How many of us in this room have done things that we're not necessarily proud of? How many have done despicable things that they're not proud of? How many are human beings? So, if you will, you came west,
Yep.
and you mentioned some of the known and unknown forms of education that you ventured through. Was this, you were looking to find meaning, or just the very nature of how your mind worked drove you to try to understand the human condition, or to explain what was in your own head and motivating you?
Well, to explain myself to myself, to see what might be underneath it all. And that's what got me to read the books I read and to participate in the disciplines that I participated in.
Actually, there's a wonderful quote that says, Werner Erhard is an authentic American genius who has taught himself, which is really an extraordinary statement to make, but this is the nature of your learning. And so once you had this, if you will, transformational experience, how ultimately did that translate into the creation of EST?
Yeah, fairly quickly, actually. You know, it's so long ago now, I can't remember the real time span, and I'm terrible about time. I always have to ask Hanukkah, how many years was that? Or when did that happen? Because I'm bad about time, loose about time. But at any rate, it was not long after I participated, one of the disciplines I participated in, I saw an opportunity to interact with people in a way that perhaps left them empowered. And I chose to start doing that, and I did it in that discipline. But then I found that it was, I was so totally inconsistent with the process there that that's when I started EST. Yeah, okay.
So tell me about EST then. I mean, or maybe obviously most people in here know, but I know it has evolved. Mm-hmm. But at the time you started it, at least for many, it was very a forceful reflection that had people oftentimes crying. Does everybody agree with that? Was I being too kind? But all of you remember it, don't you, dramatically? Right?
Well, for one thing, Jim, it was called the EST training. So, and it was not, I mean, people knew what they were going into, and they were courageous. Well, they knew it was not going to be Sunday school. Yeah, obviously they didn't know what was going to happen, and what did happen was surprising for people. But remember, there was an environment in those days in which it was kind of loosey-goosey and drop out and blah, 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 blah. And so it required a certain wake-up call. You know, when most of us wind up pretty arrogant about who we are. I mean, I know who I am. I've been like this for, you know, whatever the heck it's been, and I go through life like I'm like this, and for somebody to tell you that maybe that's not who you are, that's tough stuff. And it takes a certain wake-up call to recognize that I don't listen because I've got an already always listening, so I can't hear what you said, and I can't get over where you are, and etc. I'm going to read you a note I just got from a housekeeper that we hired about 3 or 4 months ago. Maybe it was 5 months, as I said. Hanukkah will tell you, but I can't. Somewhere in that range. And this is a really competent, able young woman who has a son who just graduated from high school and is now in college. And I was really impressed with the way she came in and started to work, and told her that I thought that she would go beyond the level at which we hired her. And at any rate,
let me move the salsa.
Thanks, Jim.
Here,
Thank
so.
you. At any rate, here's what she wrote. and I have her permission to read it, of course. She's, she asked, no.
I see you have the same communication I have with my wife.
Yeah, she had this transformation. She chose to do something that left her with a transformational experience. And here's what she said. I discovered things in my life, things I didn't have names for, but were like heavy loads hanging on me and holding me back in many ways. She goes on, I identified with having a sea of opinions on those around me, and that I'm always quick to judge, so that I've ended up trusting nobody. I've been making up stories about how people hate or dislike me. My issue with trust has been isolating me. You know, it's pretty brilliant. I mean, it makes my hair stand on end that somebody could be big enough to be that straight. At any rate, she says, I'm looking at things differently now, and I'm on a journey to opening up more and also to allow people to speak in my life. Many wars inside me have ceased. A new language is forming, and a person of integrity is emerging. Now, just read it. Speaking about the experience, this new experience of herself, this new experience of herself, she says it's unique and inspiring. So, sorry, this is going to take a few minutes. Now, that's that part. Here's the second part. The second part is I've had the privilege of working with people in prisons. As a matter of fact, right here in California, San Quentin, lots of people, lots of guys in there with sentences of life without hope of parole. And before you go in there, you sign a statement that you understand that the state will not trade something for you should you be taken hostage. Keeps you wide awake, you see. At any rate, what I learned from working with those men in prison is that they were succeeding in life. The wall was there, and the wall was there, but they had a television, and they had a kid, and they had two guys that watched their back, and they had food from the commissary. Now, I realized that many people actually live in that kind of prison. Maybe not quite that bad, but we somehow find a way, and I certainly found a way to get by with all of the limitations that I had in my life. And so, yeah, that's what, for me, called for ruthless compassion.
And I think what people, we go about and live our lives, and we think that's a life. And the result, though, many times is that we stop really seeing, and then we expect a lot of others after we've created this narrative. One of the things that we were talking about, excuse me, I got some salsa, was that, we have these experiences in our lives, and we think how we register that experience is the picture of the experience, right? But what we forget is that that experience is actually a canvas that we paint. And we paint it with our emotions. And then that gets cataloged, and every time we look at it, it's not the event, it's how we painted the event. And, it was interesting, and this was really brought forward to me one time as someone really was explaining this to me, and they said, so you're sitting with somebody who's very aggressive towards you, but if you really had insight, and put yourself in their position, you would agree that you're an asshole. And suddenly this light bulb went on that, in fact, we think our narrative is the correct narrative. And when we talk about ruthless compassion, it's not to diminish, I think, our experience per se, but to understand that an event in and of itself has no power whatsoever. It is the emotion that we paint it with that gives us power over our lives. And what was freeing for me was, at the age of 12, a woman gave me that insight. Because in my own situation, I felt, and I tell people, I felt like I was a leaf blowing in the wind, because I had no control. I was 12, my father was an alcoholic, my mother was an invalid, she was chronically depressed, had attempted suicide, we were on public assistance, we had been evicted, we didn't always have food. And I only tell you that because I kept saying, well, either there's something wrong with me or this event occurred and it was their fault. And this is a tendency we all have to do, or have to act this way. And after spending time with this woman at the age of 12, which is mentioned in my book if you want to read, I suddenly realized that, again, I had painted all of these experiences that made me a victim, that allowed me to sit and say, well, if only this happened, or I can't do this because that didn't happen, or I had this immense anger towards all of these people about my situation. And then suddenly after this, when I got this insight, I wasn't angry at anybody. And it was this most incredible gift. It wasn't to say these weren't bad experiences on some level, but I wasn't angry at the events, and I was allowed to just see them and to sit with them. And really, that fundamental experience, which I think in so many ways is what's the work that you have done, was what released me from my prison. What I found was that when I changed how this narrative I had created, which had anger, hostility, actually fear, and took that away, I did not understand what I was doing in my environment, because how I stood, how I reacted, how I responded had an effect on every other individual who interacted with me. And so when I no longer reacted that way to the world no longer reacted in a negative way to me. And that was freedom, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, it's a... Yeah, and that's, you know, that for me is a perfect illustration of what you can do to leave yourself free to be and free to act. And that's what I heard in what you said, that through the interaction you had with the woman, you told me more about it last night, it left you free to be and free to act. Yeah. And, you know, for the last, I don't know how long, maybe 30 years now, maybe it's 40, I can't remember. The way I've talked about what drives me is to discover a new meaning for what it means to be human, rather than whatever it has meant up till now. Certainly includes all of the bullshit in my life, and I'd like to see us make available to each other a new meaning for what it is to be human. And that leads me to a more practical entry into it, and that is, who am I really? And it's not who am I really, but who is this I that's all over the place, all over the room, really? What is it to be I really? Or what is it to be a self? And, you know, one of the things that got loosened in that experience coming across the Golden Gate was the importance of I and the centrality of me. And so it's been 50 years, I don't know, it's so long now, I can't remember, exercise of discovery. And that is a large part of what has generated the kind of work that I do. I avoid figuring it out. And I've learned to, I'll say it a couple different ways, I've learned to sit with it or just look at it. So most people say, well, this is good thinking. No, this is good looking as far as I'm concerned, good seeing. And it takes some time to be with it, to sit with it, to just perceive it, just look at it, see what arises in being with it. And one of the things that's really become clear to me, Jim, is the centrality, and you've just illustrated it, the centrality of reducing the significance of what's going on with me internally. And it's one of my favorite conversations today with people is to recognize, well, okay, don't figure it out and don't tell me what you've learned and don't tell me what you've read. Tell me as you sit there and as you be with yourself, what is going on with you internally. And one of the things, as you pointed out, that I think all of us will discover, because as far as I can tell, the same stuff is going on with every one of us internally. One of the things going on with people internally is what Damasio calls emotion, and what he likes to say is feeling at a subjective level. Okay, great. Yeah, and I think that's quite true. Now, the problem is most people go through life. I didn't say anybody believes this. I said most people go through life that they are what's going on with them internally. I don't like it. I am angry. I am annoyed. I am happy. I am satisfied. You know, this is who I am, huh? Not I'm being angry. Not I'm being happy. No, I am happy. I'm not being happy. Yeah. Now, so just to mention some of the others, most of us have an outlook on life, or an attitude, or a, whatever you'd like to call it, a frame for women, or a frame for old men, or a frame for this, or a frame for that. So let's call that a mental state, and the other one an emotional state. And then there's, seems to me, always to be a bodily state. And then there's this incessant thoughts mixed in every once in a while with a memory. And as far as I can tell, and you have more to say about this than I, but as far as I can tell, I have no dominion over what's going on with me internally. That somehow, some way, there it is, and I don't think that's who I am. I mean, I don't believe that's who I am, but I tend to go through life that is who I am. And it's ridiculously simple if that's true. Now, by the way, somebody will always say, yes, Werner, but another thing going on with me internally is my perceptions. No, your perceptions are about what's going on externally. So let's just leave those out for a moment and leave it as the simple-minded four. I got four things going on with me internally: mental state, emotional state, bodily state, and thoughts, and mixed in with some feelings. Now, I have made the most horrible mess out of four simple distinctions. I just can't believe it. If you talk to people, the stories that they have about how they're angry and put upon and not appreciated and blah, 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 blah. But that's all what's going on with me internally. And the people I work with, my colleagues and I, one of whom's in the room sitting over there, he and I work on this thing. Well, let's discover, not figure out, let's discover what's going on with me internally. And, you know, let's not take it for granted. Let's not obvious it. You know, I like Heidegger's notion about tranquilized obviousness. So when I look at a person, oh yeah, I know, yeah. Oh, I had dinner with, yeah, no, I know who that is. You know, there's no wonder in it. It's not, oh, great, Masha, yeah, really great. It's like, no, Masha. You know, now if you watch couples, they tend in that direction. Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Not with Masha, no. Any rate, here's my point. My point is that one of the things that enabled the work, and one of the things that I share with other people, and one of the things I'm ruthless about, is discover for yourself what is going on with you internally. And I use the word discover because if you look it up in the dictionary, it's to be struck with wonder at this, whatever this is. Yeah, holy mackerel. What's going on with me internally is simple, uncomplicated, jumbled up if I like it that way. I have no call on it, nothing, zero. I can't be angry. I can't be sad. I can't stop thinking. Yeah, you know, if it's you thinking, stop it. Yeah, no, people don't do that. They don't stop thinking. They think about not thinking maybe, but that's still more thinking, huh? Yeah. So I find that for me is the first step into the freedom to be and the freedom to act. And the other half of it, I'm going to shut up in a minute, Jim.
No, that's
the other
I'm enjoying
half
myself.
of it is...
I'm thinking while you're...
Okay, good. The other half of it is what Descartes left us with. You know, Descartes is the guy who was looking for what was truly real. And everything he came up with, he doubted. He could find a way to doubt that it was valid. And he finally, as we all know, couldn't stop doubt. He couldn't get rid of the doubting. Because if he tried to doubt the doubting, he was still doubting. Okay. So now, he then concluded, man, human beings are, sorry, this is translating the Latin, thinking things. Things, object, things. Substances, he got it from Aristotle, but never mind. Thinking things. I am a thinking thing. The one thing, sorry, I got to stand up so I get this across. The one thing he didn't doubt was the I that he came up with. He forgot to doubt this I stuff. He said, I am a thinking thing. Therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. Yeah.
I had just said that. I'm thinking, and therefore I am.
Yeah, no, all he had a right to say is, what I'm left with is doubting, not a subject that doubts. Yeah, so it's, I think, the second half of this journey into the freedom to be and the freedom to act is to start to question, what is it I'm referring to when I say I? And last story, then I'm going to shut up about this. On a train from the airport in Tokyo into Tokyo, on the train with the woman who translates for me in Japan, and Yumi. And Yumi is the most skeptical human being. She's amongst the most skeptical. She's not going to believe anything. So I asked her, I want you to find this thing you call I. I want you to find it for me. And Yumi was, of course, skeptical that obviously she was going to find the I. It was who she was. So it had to be somewhere. But when we got to the event, she sheepishly told me, I looked all over, I couldn't find the damn thing. Now, that one's pretty tough, to give up this significance about I. Yeah. And to give it its proper place, which is, okay, life is a game to some degree, like Monopoly, and you got to have a piece to play, like a Scotty dog or a top hat or a race car. And this I is useful and a piece with which to play the game. I probably said way too much.
No, not enough. But
okay.
Speaking of this I, and speaking of, you were commenting about you have this narrative, if you will, going on. I think, and this was my experience, and I think often the experience of many is you have this dialogue, but you think that dialogue...
Sorry. Just saying goodbye to a friend.
This is my dear friend Charlie Wilson, who's one of the most iconic neurosurgeons in the world.
Yep. Charlie, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Charlie. It's so nice to have so many friends who come to these and who you get to see and interact with and who actually had profound effects on your own life. But this issue of this talk in your head, what so many of us do is, hi, this is Tamara, who's a good friend of mine. Hello, Ted. Thank you. What happens for so many of us is that this dialogue that goes in our head, we think that dialogue is us. We listen to it, and we believe it. And what happens is, though, like how many people that dialogue that constantly is going on in your head says how great you are? A few of you, and obviously you guys are narcissistic. I'm kidding, of course. But for so many of us, that dialogue is this very negative, hypercritical condemnation. And what it is, though, is as a species, we have a tendency to respond to stuff that's negative because it's threatening. But the problem is we process that into our head, and it says, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the I we talk about is that. And when you say, I can't do this, and the other thing is, how many of you had friends or people close to you say, I want to do this, and they look at, so you're never going to do that. Have any of you had that experience? And isn't it horrible? People who you look to, people who you love, people who you care about, people who you think are important will tell you things like that. And it's very sad because what they're telling you is they can't do it, but they don't want you to do it. And the thing is, we process this and we say that's us and we couldn't possibly do it. And when we're talking about prisons, when you start listening to this, this creates this prison brick by brick by brick that encloses you in this very narrow thing that you can't get past. Yet, each of us has this incredible potential, and when you change that dialogue, or you don't believe that dialogue, or you stop reacting to that dialogue, everything changes in your life, and every interaction you have changes. And the thing that is absolutely critical of that, when you understand that, though, is you remember how powerful words can be, words that you say. And you try to remind yourself of the person who said that to you and hurt you. Because how many of you can recall an experience, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where somebody said something to you, and you remember it to this day because it hurt you so badly? And the thing is, you don't have to carry it with you. You're free to release it, but it's so hard to do. And what they said to you wasn't true. And the thing is, though, you can give the same gift. Not of hypercritical words, but words of acceptance, words of love. Because what happens so often, because of this narrative, we become judgmental, right? Because we have this stuff going on, so we have to categorize everybody, and we hurt them, and we don't even know it. I was talking to a woman the other day, and I was giving a talk, and she came up to me and she said, this is 30 years later, she says, my father told me I wasn't smart enough, in her case, to be a nurse. And actually, this was an event where I was speaking to nurses. Right? But imagine, this poor woman carried this. Now, in some ways, it empowered her, but the empowerment came at a great cost to her every day. You should be empowered through words of love. Washington Irving said, tears are precious things. He said that tears speak more than 10,000 tongues. And that the message of tears is one of love. People say, geez, sometimes you tear up when you're in front of people. But that's okay. You see, because so often we think that we can't show our emotion. Like, you can't show your pain, you can't show your hurt. And it's all okay. But again, it comes about judgment of how we think other people judge. Like, I had a person say to me, I was giving a talk and I became tearful, And this woman says, I could be with you for 2 hours and get rid of that. She was a psychologist. And I can be with you and take everything that is human about you, how you connect with another person, away from you. And the thing that makes you human, the thing that makes you connect, the thing that makes you feel another person's pain, I can take from you in 2 hours if you want. But tears are powerful, tears connect, tears are love, and each of you can give so much to another person by just not judging them. And more importantly, not judging yourself. So.
Great.
Well, that was a little detour.
Jim, take a minute and talk about the research, if you would, on compassion.
Wow. Well, so
Sorry, that was a
great segue. Now I can stop crying. Actually, for some of you who may be interested, there was just a book published called from Oxford University Press, which is probably one of the most prestigious academic presses. And it's an academic book that I'm the senior editor on, and actually 2 of my colleagues who work with me are also co-editors, and it's called The Handbook of Compassion Science. And this is almost a 600-page text that talks about the latest cutting-edge research. And I have to tell you something. When I came up with this idea of studying compassion, and it's 10 years ago, actually, next year, I had people say, why would you ever do that? That is an academic dead end. No, and in fact, when I had left Stanford for a period of time, and I had come back, and I went to a variety of scientists in psychology and neuroscience, and I said, I'd like to work with you to explore this area. And without exception, every one of them said, why would I do that? And now the great thing about scientists is that they are motivated by a few things, and if you pay for research, they're highly motivated. So actually, we began these different research experiments that I funded, and we found some extraordinary results. And 2 of those people who I initially engaged changed the focus of their research to focus actually on compassion. And the thing is that what we don't appreciate as a species, to have theory of mind, to have abstract thinking, to have complex language, which result in this huge development of our cortex, it required our species, unlike other species which swim away after they're born or run into the forest, we have an absolute requirement that our species is cared for 10, 12, 15 years, in my case, 37 years. But our children learn from us, but the extraordinary thing about that is that we have several attributes that have allowed us to survive. It is the ability to read emotional states in a microsecond. How many of you have loved ones or partners, they walk into a room, they don't need to see anything, and you know exactly what's going on with them, right? That is connection, and it's something we all have. But we are hardwired, because why would a mother care for a child for 10, 12, 15 years? Because the resource cost, the energy cost, huge, huge, huge. And it's because we are hardwired to care. That is our default state. That is how we function. That is how our physiology works at its best. When a mother or an individual cares for another person, they have the release of hormones or neurotransmitters that result in a feeling of pleasure, a feeling of reward, a feeling of happiness. And so we know that when an individual sees another individual do an act of kindness or caring, it spreads, ripples, and it motivates other people to care. We know that when you are in a situation, and how many people have been in a room, somebody walks in the room, they have a scowl on their face, their body language is aggressive, and all of you sit like this, right? Because you go into threat mode. When you are in threat mode, you cannot have access to your executive control function, which is discernment, thoughtful decision making, because you're surviving. It shuts everything down so you will survive, and you stop listening. Yet this is how people interact with people. Another person walks into a room and they sit there and they say, hello, how are you? You know, it's a beautiful day today. I ran into so-and-so, and it was just so nice to see them. And it's so wonderful to be with you today. And you know, I really feel that I care for you. And how does that change everything? You're suddenly relaxed. You're suddenly going, wow, this is pretty cool. Because we are made to care. So when you act with intention, with compassion, your blood pressure decreases, your peripheral vascular function is improved, your blood pressure decreases, your heart rate becomes more variable, which is a good thing. It is associated with a decrease in heart attacks or sudden cardiac death. Your stress hormones are decreased. Your inflammatory proteins that are released are decreased, and inflammatory proteins are associated with a lot of disease states, and in fact, your telomeres lengthen. So there is every benefit every day where you are rewarded when you care for the other. And this is the other problem, though, is as part of our evolution, and they're good things and they're bad things, right? We have an excessive stress mode now because we are have the same DNA as we had 200,000 years ago. Nothing's changed. But we have a very modern society that makes a lot of demands on our time, and it creates a lot of stress for individuals. The other thing that happens is until 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, we lived in groups of 10 to 50. We lived in tribes. So we have a tendency to identify with people who look like us, act like us, think like us. And while on the, in a harsh environment, that worked really well, and you could identify when another of your tribe was suffering and intervene, in modern society, it's horrible. And we have a tendency to look at the other as the other. Yet we only transcend when we look at the other as us. So we are running out of time, but that's okay. Werner, talk to me about integrity.
Well, it's really, again, I always have to tell people I don't say nice things, which means, by which I mean, you can trust what I say. I'm going to be straight with you. And in the beginning of the work that my colleagues and I were developing, integrity became a really fundamental expression of having gotten past the way you wound up being. That is to say, you could be counted on for your word. And so that was around for a very long time. Then I met a extraordinary economist, academic economist by the name of Michael Jensen. And Mike is, I think, or at least he was at one time, the most referenced economist in the whole community. Mike's a really, really bright guy, but he had a transformational experience, and he became interested in making that more available. But then he got really fascinated with this integrity stuff, and what fascinated him was, sorry, I'm going to use economic language here for a second, I'll try to explain it. he said that the way in which we treated integrity made it a positive phenomenon. Now, positive for most of us sounds like something good, except for an economist, it's not something good, it's simply the way it is. So integrity for most people is a good idea, something you ought to have, something it's good to have, something that nice people have, but and not nice people don't have. But as Mike and I have been working on this, I think 10 years. The last paper we wrote on integrity was putting integrity into finance.
Wow, that would be nice.
And I have to tell you, it was accepted by a pretty prestigious journal called Capitalism and Society, the editor of which is a Nobel laureate in economics. So we're starting to make a few little inroads. Anyway, let me tell you what integrity is a positive phenomenon, is a description of the way things work. So I'll do this really fast. Integrity is defined as the state of being whole, complete, unbroken, sound, and perfect, never mind the rest of it. And so something is either in that state or it isn't. An object is either whole, complete, unbroken, sound, and perfect condition, or it isn't. A system likewise. And a person as a person. Now, I'm a person as a body, and, my body's either whole, complete, unbroken, sound, and perfect condition, or it isn't. And if it isn't, there are consequences. The consequence of being less than, now I'll use the short phrase, whole and complete, is a diminution, a lowering of workability. Things don't work well when they lack integrity. That is to say, when they're less than whole and complete. Pretty obvious. And workability is all you need. Sorry, let me get this straight. Whole and complete is all you need for workability. And workability is either an opening or a limit for performance. It's not the whole story about performance. You need something in addition to workability. But as workability goes down, the opportunity for performance goes down. And that's integrity as a positive phenomenon, as just the way things work. So people who allow their integrity to diminish wind up with a lessened opportunity for performance. Doesn't mean they don't perform, because you can get a bicycle with a missing spoke to perform really well if you've got a champion bicycle rider on it. But as you reduce whole and complete, you reduce workability. As you reduce workability, you reduce the opportunity for performance. And so that's, in 2 seconds, Mike and I are in the process. Sorry. Mike and I are in the process of writing the final thing we're ever going to write on integrity for Cambridge University Press, about the story about integrity as a positive phenomenon. Okay, that's my whole story.
Not the whole story. Let me ask you a question. When you look over this extraordinary life and career and the things that you've done, and I want to reference this back actually to the Hunger Project, actually. What is the centrality of what you have been trying, the gift you have been giving people?
Well, here, what happened was very early after doing the training for, I don't know, a year or two or whatever the heck it was, I was now observing people who had been through that transformational experience, and they were different. They wanted to make a difference. I watched people make big sacrifices when they were confronted by an opportunity to make a difference. They would take it on even at a fairly significant sacrifice. And I watched kids from, in those days we called them youth at risk. Yeah, I watched youth at risk go through this transformational experience, and all of a sudden, they were the leaders in the community. I watched guys in prison do the same thing. At any rate, I became convinced by observation that people who have achieved a certain freedom to be and freedom to act, people who were at least significantly free of the limitations that they maybe had built up in what was going on with them internally, wanted to make a difference. And that's how the Hunger Project got born. I looked for where could the people that I knew, the people that I had worked with, the people that I watched do extraordinary things for themselves, I wanted to find a place where they and I could participate in making a difference. And in those days, hunger was inevitable. It just couldn't, it was inevitable. And we committed ourselves to getting hunger, to the end of hunger, to be an idea whose time had come. And I don't know, something like 5 million people participated in making that happen.
And the reason I bring that up is that each of us has the ability, again, to connect and make something happen. And never underestimate this power within you to do this. And Werner is just an extraordinary example of that. But each of us has that. What I'd like to do now is to open the mics for question and answer. So just come to the mic here. You can form a line. And we'll go and do some question and answers, and we'll see what we might learn from all of that.
That's
Yes.
interesting. There are no questions on this side.
These are the knowers.
Yeah.
Hi. Werner, I used to work for you many years ago in New York. Laura Owen.
Yeah,
I used
yeah.
to be Maxwell.
Yes,
be Maxwell.
thank you.
Hi, great to see you. And Dr. Doty, I read your book. It's great.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Okay, now that I've kissed ass here. No.
Done a hell of a job.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good to go now. You talking about how caring is in our DNA. And I look at what's going on in the world, and I'll just take one thing, okay? There's so many things we could talk about, but let's just say refugees, millions of refugees. What's going on with our DNA that's being okay? What is the dysfunction that's going on there?
It's not okay, of course. The problem is that when you create fear, it results in people doing things that are not fundamentally natural to them, because they go into their stress mode, and they don't become more open, they become less open. If you look in our own political situation, you see a fear narrative and a group of people who are terrified and who then create the other. And in a artificial narrative that there's not enough, or something's being taken from me, or somebody's taking advantage, then you objectify the other and you justify doing horrible things. And we see it over and over again. the one thing that I know for sure is that if I act how I wish others to act, I can control that. And that is the only thing I know for sure. And the other, I mean,
No, I like what Jim said about fear makes people less human. Yeah. And, there's probably a lot more to be said about the whole issue that you brought up, but that's a pretty good beginning.
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was very excited, Werner, to hear you talking about this idea about disidentifying with the I and being able to step back and just in a place of looking or discovering. Yeah. And I was excited about it because the last year or two, that's the way my spiritual journey has been going.
Great.
And and so I just loved hearing you talk about that yourself to us. And I wondered, to me, it's been coming to me through the study of non-duality and some of the teachers like Rupert Spira and Advaita and things like that. And I just wondered if you've studied any of those ideas, or if this has come more just through your own awarenesses.
The answer is no, okay. But lots and lots and lots of others, and probably people like that.
Yes.
And like I said, I got value out of everything I've ever studied and everything I've ever participated in, and I have a lot of respect. Jim has interviewed lots of really great people, and I've watched some of the interviews that he did. Maybe not the whole thing, but a good portion of them. Nevertheless, and he's had some of the real thing here that he's interviewed and spoken to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Werner. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for your technology, because when I went to Landmark, after that, I was like, wow, like I can see the reality now and the matrix, and I felt elevated. But at the same time, for some reason, in my day-to-day jobs, I have the context of Silicon Valley, and what occurs to me is that I want to make the next Apple, or the next big company.
Great.
The problem is, after listening to you, is that my ego, and I see myself, and I'm like, that's your ego, so why you're doing that? But I'm like, just can't get rid of it because I want to do it. But one side of me is the creative, artistic side, which says, doesn't matter, go and do your art and do other things, and there's a conflict, and could you help resolve it for me?
Well, yeah, I don't know whether I can resolve it for you, but let me tell you how I resolved it. Yeah, in Zen Buddhism, there's what they call the high road and the low road. And the high road is very wonderful. And on the low road, you have to do everything wrong first. And then you get to enlightenment. So maybe give yourself some room to participate in this I expression.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't get stuck there. Keep going out. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Erhard. Two questions. During your research, your reading, your discovery, when you were putting together EST, did you ever read or investigate the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous?
Oh yes. Yeah. Yes. And the other one was, I'm going to forget the man's name, but the guy who wrote the book about raising the floor. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't bother with you until you hit the floor. But this guy wrote a book about how to raise the floor, and I learned a lot from him and was able to practice some of the things that he had discovered actually worked for people. Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous and the other 3 anonymous entities. Yeah, they're great. People, they work for a lot of people.
I was just curious about that. Second question, as a discoverer of truth, a presentation of truth to people, have you ever noticed or considered in your personal experience the outside actions, okay, on your, or the attempts to question your integrity and your character
Oh, yeah.
as a truth discoverer and sharing the truth with people? Have you ever noticed or discovered or thought about how the similarity that is with the life of Christ? How?
Yeah.
How?
So look.
How if Christ was crucified, like, did you ever notice that wow, this is what I'm experiencing when you experience whatever you
Yeah,
did?
so obviously I have no right to have any relationship with Christ and what Christ represented. And yeah, I think that there's a certain similarity from people who achieved a certain breakthrough beyond what it used to be human to what it's now to be human. And I think it's happened a few times in history. At one point, we all would be accept that we were not going to call the shots. The chief was going to call the shots. The head, the king, the queen, the whatever it was going to call the shots. And that's just the way it was. And somehow, some way, we broke through that. And while it's not all gone, it's pretty much undermined in the broader scope of society. At least the part of society where I've spent most of my time, although I've made damn sure I spent time in those other societies, so I had a sense of them. Yeah, I have no problem with that. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, it's been a dream come true for me to be with you.
Thank you.
I did the Landmark Forum right after the LA riots with Crips and Bloods
Yeah.
and Latino cholos that I used to try to be like. And Jerome Downs was my Landmark Forum leader. And he's yes. Yeah. I've listened to, I never did EST. I listened to all your tapes.
Okay.
I used to memorize your
Sorry about
intonation.
that.
I created myself as an empowerment comedian in a Landmark seminar. Yeah. I spoke at a high school in Vegas this morning. I flew here to be here with you. I'm flying back to Vegas tonight to speak at another high school tomorrow. Yeah. I take what you've created and I make it funny and I give it to thousands and thousands of students all over the country. Yeah. So,
Great. And I just want to say, until you make it your own, and therefore it's no longer what I created, it's now what you created, makes you powerful.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
yes.
Thank you.
My question for you, and I had Lily kind of try and coach me because I got to see you at Berkeley, and I went up to her and I go, I have noticed that now transformation's out there. And
Yeah.
everyone's getting a master's in transformational leadership. And have you taken this course? And have you taken this seminar? And people take a seminar and then they think they can teach it. And then they package it. And then they're making money. And they've done 2 seminars.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame. But it is
let me ask you
possible
this.
for people. Look, here's my view. Excuse me for interrupting you. Here's my view. There's nothing I want people to learn from me. It's what you discovered for yourself that makes it powerful.
Okay, sir, I think we have to go. We have a lot of people have questions.
I just want to ask, can I just say to people, because I've been saying this to everybody, that the S training and what you created was the granddaddy of it all. It came from you and
Okay,
it spread out
thank
to
you.
the world. Can
No,
I say
thank you
that?
very much. Yeah, I get who you are. I got
Okay.
it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
Love you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Werner. I just had a question. You said something to the effect that you're not nice, you'll tell it to us straight.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Doty is talking about we're hardwired for caring. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you've got this ruthless compassion and...
Yeah, but look, two things. What people misunderstand ruthless compassion, I think. Look, Jim puts knives into people's brains. Yeah.
And in fact, I was operating until 4:45 today,
Yeah.
actually, from 7:30 to...
Yeah, and I happened to, because he had some photographs of what he had accomplished, it was really ridiculous, remarkable. And, the guy stood up for, I'm sure, hours on end to do it. And you can't do what he did without caring. Yeah, you can get some ways into it, but I don't think you can do it like he does it without caring. So this ruthless compassion is an expression of caring. And I couldn't agree more with Jim that it's fundamental to being human. I didn't say it was fundamental to all people. I just said when you find your humanity, you will find caring there. And that's what happened, for example, with the Hunger Project. People found their humanity and the caring was natural. They wanted to make a difference, but they didn't want to make a difference to look good. They wanted to make a difference that would make a difference. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Hi, Werner. My name's Rayona. You and I have had a few of these conversations over the last 40 years.
Okay.
So I came tonight, first of all, I would come anywhere to see you, but the topic was of particular interest to me because the day after Thanksgiving, I'm going to see my dad, who I haven't talked to in 26 years.
Oh,
And the last time I had a long dry spell, I did the S training, and then we talked, and then things didn't work out, and so 26 years goes by. The thing I find myself in right now is, the best way to describe it is unrecognizable. Like,
good, I got that.
two things going on, one in relationship and one with regard to my dad, where I find myself like, this isn't the me that I was up until recently. So I'm struggling with that. And then the thing with my dad that I believe was the catalyst, and I didn't put it together until tonight. So my brother died suddenly 4 months ago, like just dropped dead of a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And I had this regret that I was going to go see him, and I hadn't seen him and all that stuff. Well, I called my other brother to call my dad because we weren't talking. And so my brother calls him, and when I talked to my brother, I said, hey, did you talk to Dad? And he said, yeah. I said, what did he say? He said he started crying. Now, he hadn't talked to my brother in 45 years.
Yeah, doesn't make any difference.
Right.
Yeah.
And he started crying.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I thought, if he hadn't talked to him for 45 years and he cried, then if I died, or he died, then that's, right? That's probably still there. So I sent an email and said, hey, you want to talk? And they said yes, him and my stepmother, and they're like welcoming me with open arms. And so I guess around the whole compassion connection is, I think that what had me reach out was my compassion for him. But what I came for tonight was more about self-compassion.
Great.
And how to grant the same kind of generosity to myself that I seem to give away.
Yeah. Here's one of the things that helps me a lot. It's all made up anyhow. It's interpretation all the way down. Yeah. So, I gotta own what's there as belonging to me, and then I don't have to be at the effect of it because it belongs to me. I'm the guy who made it up. Yeah, I created that conversation for me to live, And if I own it and I make it my own, I can let it be. And here's the big secret. Anything you can let be lets you be. So if I can let my own stupidity and ignorance and smallness, if I can let it be, it lets me be, and it leaves me free to be and free to act. And, you know, your compassion for your dad speaks about your being a big human being. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Werner. It was about 40 years ago that you and I first worked together in the experience of satisfaction and professors. And you consistently told us professors, as you're saying today, that it is going inside and pulling out the learning from the students, not putting in information, which is a real misunderstanding of what education is about. So I'm sitting here today, 40 years later, with a room full of people wanting to know more about compassion. And one of the ways I think we're interested is what's the how of it that we can walk out of here? What is the how that we can do today? One of the ways I like to do it is to just think about what it took every one of us to get here.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be here, the logistics of it all, the things we didn't do, and so on.
Yeah.
And by reaching in again to seeing me as a person and looking to see the other person as kind of the same person without, as you taught us all those years ago, regret or resentment, the only two emotions you said that are about the past and not changeable.
Okay.
So it seems like having that kind of compassion for ourselves,
Yeah.
to not judge, to live. Anything the two of you would like to offer in addition to that?
Well, as I said earlier, and as you reiterated in part, I think that be kind to yourself. I mean, that's really the key. And look, when Werner had talked about some of his negative experiences or being an asshole, and I asked how many of us have done despicable things, and it shows you, every one of us is living this. And when you recognize that we're all frail, fragile human beings, and the power of just being gentle with yourself, because that gives you the gift of allowing you to see your own vulnerability, your own fragility, and then seeing that it is the same that all of us have, and we're all connected in that way. And that when you give that love to another person unconditionally, without expectation, that's really the greatest gift you can give to anybody, and it is what enriches your life, and it's what gives your life meaning. And as Werner would say, everything else is bullshit. So, yes, sir.
Hi.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for setting all of this up, Jim, and the research that you do, and thank you, Werner, for being here tonight. I did the forum a couple of years ago, and I was very skeptical going in, and one of the things so I got it at the end, or I got what I got, and and one of the things that really fascinated me was that even though you had left the work or the corporation maybe 30 years ago, 25 years ago, it was still delivering the results consistently. And if you run a company,
Maybe better. Go
maybe
ahead.
better, maybe better. I don't know. But so I was sitting there and I was thinking, how is this possible? Because, you know, in my company, if I'm not pushing the right buttons, things just fall apart. And I was wondering, what is the key to creating this kind of consistency of something that delivers these results every time?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it has to do with constituting the enterprise as an opportunity for people to contribute. And as I told you, just unfailingly, when people start to get who they are, and I always tell people, if you turn around real fast and see yourself, promise it'll move you to tears. But never mind. The point is, to answer your question, the point is that the organization has given lots of people, the room's full of them, lots of people an opportunity to contribute, and that is what's continued to make the organization viable. And it's also not so bad that my brother Harry, who, by the way, was my brother Harry, with whom I worked very, very closely before he became the CEO, and he's been the CEO now for almost 25 years, almost unheard of. Nobody lasts that long. And as I said, the organization has just gotten better run and more successful and more useful and more contributing and making a greater difference all the time. So it helps to have a really, really great brother.
I would love to sit with all of you here.
Hold on 1 second. Now, everybody should know Jim has to leave because he's going to give a talk tomorrow in another place, and he has to get an airplane tonight, so we have to let him close things up.
And I would love to sit with you all night, but I think just also the nature of this room, we have to be out of here. So unless you want to just sit here forever.
No, I'm good. Yeah.
Really, and this happens actually a lot, we're just going to have to call it now, and I'm so sorry. I know. And I have this guilt feeling whenever I leave these because I have all these eyes looking at me. And so I would like to thank everyone who has shared tonight, and thank you all so much for being with us. I want to also thank Werner for coming tonight, his friendship, and the incredible work that he's done. I'd like to give him just an incredible...
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
And I would also like to say, in a selfish way, in a little bit, many of you think that because CCARE is at Stanford, that Stanford shares their $21 billion endowment with me. They do not at all. Although I am very thankful and joyous to be affiliated with Stanford. If you like the work that we do, the things that we do, coming to these events, if you would consider at some point make a contribution. I don't like to ask for things necessarily, but at the same time, that's how we survive. So thank you again so much.
I just really want to thank you for coming. It's an act of generosity and kindness, and I appreciate it, and I don't see it any other way other than your generous and kind participation. Thank you very much.